Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Service Impact Podcast. And excited about this show as we get to delve into something that I think anybody in marketing thinks about a little bit, and that is this idea that, man, I need to make some really killer content, and I need it to be seen, and oh my gosh, Beyonce's got a brand new song out, and it seems to be trending on Instagram, and I want to use that, and I want to make this real pop, and I want hundreds of thousands of views. I want millions of views and everybody to know my name. So I'm being joined today by Matthew Hughes, and he's a business affairs manager with Birdie Management, and he has over 10 years of experience overseeing broadcast, digital, and integrated productions for major brands. He specializes in contract negotiations, production operations, and compliance, ensuring creative excellence within legal and regulatory frameworks. Matthew, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, in a nutshell, that was the bio intro. But if you could put this in a nutshell, what is it exactly that you do?
Oh man, I don't know that I can nutshell it more than the bio. I work with a number of different ad agencies on their behalf as they work with their brand clients. Everything from talent payments management, celebrity deals, music licensing, as you referenced at the top of the episode. Also, currently a lot of conversations around generative AI and the do's and don'ts of that when it comes to brands utilizing that kind of emerging technology. And I work very closely with agencies' production departments, especially when it comes to talent and making sure that, everyone's getting paid on time and everyone's on the right contract and we're negotiating favorable terms for the brand, as well as working within the Screen Actors Guild commercials contract, and so the SAG union world, as well as non-union productions.
So if I were to kind of pull out some of the main points of what you just said, yeah. You're basically hired to keep brands out of trouble.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, yes.
So
a lot of compliance.
A lot of compliance, making sure that what they're producing, what they're creating, isn't going to be something that costs them a lot more than what it already cost them to produce and create. Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely. So everybody wants to be noticed, right? I mean, this is the age of like, oh, come on, you need to know me. And I want thousands of eyeballs. I want millions of eyeballs. And we see all these influencers, and even at times companies creating this content that's just rad, and it's getting followed and liked and reposted, and there's a vibe to it, and it usually has one of the latest top hits associated with it, and everybody wants this, and I want some of that.
Sure.
And so can I go produce a mashup of cool video content for a customer and pair it with the latest Lady Gaga hit?
If you have the money to pay for it, yes. You can do almost anything you want. So I think the first thing to mention is, when it comes to advertising, fair use does not exist. In other people's content that isn't brand sponsored, so when you're referencing influencers, if they are not promoting a brand, they may well fall under fair use and be protected by the First Amendment. Advertising is not protected by the First Amendment, and there is no fair use and there is no parody, which are conversations I have at least twice a week with creatives when they say, hey, we want to parody this song or this movie. And I say, that's great, but not if it's being sponsored by a brand. So can you take other people's content and other people's intellectual property and use it in your personal influencer channel? Yes, probably. The moment that there's a brand involved, almost certainly not. And I think what happens often is you have either brands that are incredibly risk tolerant and are willing to really kind of swing for the fences and will do what they shouldn't really be doing. And other brands, more established brands, will look at that and say, well, they did it, why can't we? And often the answer is, well, because you have a legal team who's going to tell you that you can't. Or you have, we're looking at an Instagram reel, or we're looking at a TikTok, or we're looking at a YouTube short, and we don't know, just from looking at it, what has happened behind the scenes. There may be a deal in place. They might have, a very short 1 week term with that commercial, using that song, and they paid a cost that they could afford to pay. So it's always difficult to know from the outside what has led to that video existing on the internet. And it's very dangerous to assume that just because someone else has done it, we also can do it for our brand that we're representing.
So an influencer, by definition, for the most part, exists to influence buying and purchasing. So at where is it possible for them to operate under fair use if their entire existence is to develop their business and develop the brands associated with it?
I'm just going to show my hand early doors. I freaking hate influencers. I hate influencer culture. I hate that it's a thing that I have to constantly think about whether this person is a micro or a macro influencer, and that those terms even exist in the society we live in. But that being said, we live in a society and there are rules. And so I understand that I have to work within the system. So if an influencer, many times what happens is influencers get their start by finding a niche or joining in with an area, for example, all the men and women who post like gym stuff, like fitness inspiration. Often early doors, they're just posting shots of their butt and then hashtagging it correctly to build their follower base. And then that gets them to the point. So all of that time when they're just taking selfies in the gym, that's fair use, because that's them just being like, look at me, I'm so attractive, you should definitely follow me, and then maybe I'll tell you about this smoothie that I like, that's my recipe. And then they get to the point where they're big enough where a brand reaches out and say, hey, we noticed that you post a lot of information about smoothies. Would you promote our protein powder? And then at that point, they can't just put any song on there. And that's when you get into this place where most of the social media platforms like TikTok, like Instagram, have a commercial music library, and those are cleared for ads and sponsored content. Or you're having to do a deal with the master and publisher licensor of like a more popular song, not even necessarily like a Beyonce song, just any published song that's owned by, like Warner Chappell or Universal Music Group, to name a couple of publishing houses. And that's where you have to start doing the deal and start paying money to say, hey, we want to use this for 3 months on this spot for this product. And that's when the influencer has to, normally would then come under like an ad agency, and the ad agency is the one that would do the deal. So initially you can be fair use because all you're promoting is your own hotness. And then when you start promoting brands, it stops being a fair use scenario.
So how many, I'm fascinated with this, and maybe you can't tell me this, but you would think with all the stupidity that exists in our country and our world, and just the greed that so many people have, and just kind of like this singleness of purpose, I'm going to be famous, I'm going to make money, you would think that there would just be a gazillion lawsuits going on right now with influencers that have literally gone unabated for years stealing people's music, stealing people's creations, not paying for them. I mean, I know that there's probably no way of knowing this, but on the inside, you'd have to hear of maybe famous influencers that have been drug into court and literally the folks that they've stolen from want to be paid.
Yeah, and there are incidences of at least, I think, two I can think of off the top of my head. I know that I'm pretty sure. See, look, now I'm nervous that I'm going to say the wrong name.
Don't even use a name. You don't even go there.
A famous English footballer who is married to a famous 90s English pop starlet. So, figure it out. Definitely was, I believe was, if not sued, certainly fined over not correctly disclosing that the post that he posted was an ad. So that wasn't really like an IP music issue. It was more, and the same is true of at least one, if not two, of the Kardashians. They've also been fined for the same thing. So the thing that we see typically is that the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, typically goes over after larger influencers because obviously it's more prominent, and it's more often around influencers not correctly disclosing that the content they're posting is sponsored by a brand, because that's misleading. And so that's because that's the FTC, and that's what they do. They're like, hey, we're protecting the consumer. And so you have a large federal organization that is their job to protect the consumer. And so that's more where we see the fines come from. However, there are also instances of there was a pretty infamous case around a Nicki Minaj album cover where the album cover features a gentleman's back, and there's a very distinctive tattoo on the back, and there was a guy who was like, hey, that's my tattoo, and you didn't clear that with me, nor did you clear it with the tattoo artist, because tattoos have any numbers of copyright claims on them. The artist that did it, whoever drew it, the person whose body it is on, that was an issue. There was an issue recently with Kat Von D tattooed a photograph of a trumpet player, and the photographer said, hey, that's my photograph, and so I own the copyright. So there are instances, and it's one of those things where when you're in it and you're looking at Adweek or whatever, these things do come up. And I've also been privy to record labels reaching out just not with a full lawsuit or fine or anything, and just saying like, hey, you didn't license this correctly, can you take it down, and we want a small fee. And there's even, going back to the AI stuff, there's people who are utilizing AI to scrape the internet and find songs that haven't been correctly licensed on people's, Reels and Instagram and what have you, and then using that basically AI alert system to reach out and say, hey, they'll then go to the artist and say, hey, let me represent you for a fee. This person's using your song without your permission. And then they come and they say, hey, you have to pay us for the use of this. And they're getting, a 10% cut of the fee that gets paid to the artist. And that's a whole new business model that's specifically using AI to catch people who aren't correctly licensing music on their hashtag ad.
Wow. Fascinating times, eh?
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. Okay.
Yeah, it's wild out here.
It is wild, man. Okay. So I think for the service businesses that we work with, I think about, the $4 or $5 million service company, let's call it a roofing company, that's like, yeah, we just need eyeballs, and they go and they've got their guys on the top of a roof doing some really dumb dance and doing it to, the latest song. There doesn't appear to be consequences for those folks. Now, granted, I wouldn't call that per se an advertisement, although it's on their commercial social media accounts, and it's clearly to grab attention for the business. What should, I mean, you don't really see consequences for companies that size, or at least it doesn't appear that way. But what should people that are trying to do things the right way, I mean, like, if you're not seeing consequences, don't you, it's got to feel pretty tempting to just be like, yeah, whatever, we'll get a call, we'll get an email. I mean, how would you deal with that as a competing business?
Yeah, I think so. My two kind of golden rules that I will tell every brand until I'm blue in the face is: don't lie, don't steal. And so that obviously becomes exponentially more dangerous the larger your brand is. Like your guys who have, their roofing team doing the Harlem Shake or whatever, like on a roof, versus Target putting an ad in the Super Bowl. Like there's a massive spectrum of risk. And so I think I would always advise you shouldn't use a song that you haven't licensed or isn't part of the social media platform's commercial music library. However, I understand that there is a level of risk acceptance in those, maybe smaller, more local companies who are like, yeah, but also we want to join in with this TikTok trend. And yes, it is technically an ad because we are promoting our business, but we understand that a lot of other people are doing it. And so we, as the brand, as the company, feel comfortable with the risk. I think as long as they understand that there is a risk, like, yes, what is likely to happen is you're going to maybe get asked to take that video down. That might be what happens. And then you're like, oh, that's a bummer because, we spent the money to make that video and now we can't show it on our TikTok page or whatever. However, there's also a risk that a copyright lawyer, which is a whole type of just lawyers, and all they do is copyright infringement, is going to see your video and they're going to come after you. And that could really damage your business and your finances. So I think the thing that I would really, really emphasize is you have to understand that there is a risk. The risk may be acceptable to you, and it may be small, but it is very real, because copyright law is real. Just like, for example, in that roofing company, if another roofing company took their logo and took their name, hopefully that roofing company has registered their trademark, registered their word mark and their logo with the United States Trademark Office, and they would want to go after that competing company, and they would want to, at best, demand a cease and desist, maybe even look for some kind of financial compensation. That's going to flow both ways. The same thing with if they're using a song that they haven't correctly licensed, the artist or record company owners of that song may say, hey, you've taken something that is ours and used it for your own financial benefit at our financial detriment, and we would like financial compensation.
Yeah, I mean, if you've posted it, if you've launched it, you probably don't have much of a defense.
No, you've broken the rules. Yeah, you've done the thing that you're not supposed to do, and you've made it public facing, and you've made an ad for your company using someone else's unlicensed intellectual property.
And just I want to just pause for a second and define ad. Does an ad need to be something that you're paying Google or you're paying something programmatic, or is an ad by definition, from where you're coming from, literally just it could be just a social post where you're not really, I guess, paying for anything. Yeah. It's an owned channel, and you're doing it on your own channel. Is that still considered an ad in your space?
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of talk about paid versus organic media, which is a good conversation to have. But when it comes to defining an ad, are you putting out some kind of image or text or film that, or audio on the radio that promotes your business, that's an ad. Like it doesn't matter if you put paid media behind it and pay to boost it on like the Google algorithm or what have you. If you post it to your owned channel, for Lance's Roofing Limited, like immediately it's an ad because you're posting it as a business for the sake of increasing business. Now, obviously, on like a roofing channel, you might do a video where it's like a time lapse of like this amazing like reconstruction that you did. That one there is definitely like room to argue maybe that's content, but the moment that you have any kind of like call to action, like even if it's just like this is our website, this is our phone number, or really if it is on your owned channel, like it immediately leans towards you're trying to drum up business, so it is an advertisement for your business.
You'd have a hard time defending it on
You
your
would
own
have a
channel.
really hard time, yeah. And trust me, in the last 10 years, from 2015 to now, the concept of like content versus ad has been a massive conversation, especially with the SAG commercials contract, because I've been through 4 different revisions of the SAG commercials contract since I started this work in 2015. It's revised every 3 years, so 16, 19, 22, and 25. And the conversation around content versus ad has been a really hot topic because more and more people are trying to argue, no, it's just content, so it doesn't fall under the SAG commercials contract, because they're trying to get out of paying people a certain amount of fees, or they're trying to get away with an element of fair use. And it's just not true. Like anytime that you are promoting your business in any capacity, that is an ad. And so you're immediately then beholden to all of those like FTC rules and regulations.
So I guess I'd liken it to you can not disclose fully your tax burden.
Yep.
And you may get away with it.
Sure.
And you may not get away with it. And if you don't get away with it, it might be very painful for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and that's the thing. It's all about, and that's what I try to do consistently with my clients, is explain both the level of risk, because there are things that are more risky than others. Like shooting a commercial for, a car ad, and at some point one of the drivers gets into the car and it's a wide shot and he happens to wear like a pair of Nikes. Obviously, not ideal. You don't want to imply any kind of like cross promotion or endorsement from Nike for the car company, but relatively low risk. I would still say, hey, we need to change that guy's sneakers, but it is relatively low risk. Versus you're making a spot for McDonald's that's going to play in at the ESPYs, and you use All the Single Ladies by Beyonce, and you haven't licensed it. Insanely high risk. Don't do it. So with the roofing company being like, hey, we're just going to have these guys do a fun like TikTok dance on the roof, and it's going to play to this song that is the current trending TikTok song. Relatively low risk. Like you're pretty, a smaller company. It's not having any paid media behind it. It's just being posted organically to your channel. You're not putting it on broadcast TV for the world to see. But the thing that I always want to emphasize is that is a risk. Like you are taking a risk, and you have to really understand that level of risk before you can, in my opinion, before you can comfortably say yes to it. Because again, you're seeing other brands do it, and so you're like, well, I want a piece of that action because look at how much engagement they're getting because of what they've done. Like my brother's plumbing company did it with a guy in the city sewers, and it was awesome, and it got so many likes, and he got a bunch of business out of it. But you can't assume that there wasn't a deal in place, or you don't know their level of risk tolerance.
Yeah, great point. You mentioned something earlier I want to circle back on, and that is the idea of, this emerging business where folks are using AI to scrape the web, look for unlicensed content. You'd think that copyright attorneys, if they're anything like their ambulance chasing brethren, that they would also be looking for opportunities to, go and take what they think is, should be paid. I mean, could we see more of this as time goes on, as AI becomes more capable of tracking these rule breakers down? I mean, could the risk actually increase in the near future for some of these companies that think, I'm the little guy and nobody cares about me? But it could potentially come home to roost here in the near future.
Yeah, I absolutely think that that is highly likely. I only know about the AI scraping because I personally in the last 6 months have dealt with it, and it was for a very small, um, it was very small fry. It was a guy who had made a song and he owned it, and it had become a TikTok trend, and a brand that I'm, like 2 degrees of separation from copied the TikTok trend for an ad. So pretty much the example that we're talking about with the roof. Now it's a bigger brand. It's a national brand, and they ended up paying not a high amount of money, but that is purely out of honestly like luck. Like if that artist and the AI engine guy that was representing the artist had demanded more money, there would have been a negotiation back and forth, but they had all of the power in that negotiation. There was no way the brand could be like, well, we don't feel like we owe you that much money, because the artist could have said, well, no, you used my song illegally and you broke copyright law, so you have to pay me what I demand. And if, a copyright lawyer who I think are very much the ambulance chasers of the IP industry, uh, if they had found a song that was owned by one of their artists that they represented, or owned by, one of the larger publishing houses, like record companies like Universal Music Group or Warner Chappell, they could have very easily demanded a significant sum of money. And so I think, again, right now, relatively low risk, because also, who's worried about like a roofing company that has like a crew of 5 dudes like doing a TikTok trend? Like no one's mad about it, but they could be very quickly, and it could become a lot easier for them to get mad and find out that you've done it. Thinking about how swiftly AI has infiltrated all that is good and right in the world, and how quickly it has developed from, there was that video of when AI videos were first being made of like Will Smith eating spaghetti, and it's just a nightmare. And then in 2 years, it looks like an actual like video of him, and you're like, oh, that would trick someone's granddad, and they would think that it's really a video of Will Smith eating spaghetti. And I think that there's such a very fast, insane progression of that technology, and it's going to be utilized to make the most money, because that's what technology is used for, is who can this benefit financially. And I think that it's going to benefit people finding other people that have broken the rules and getting money out of them.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it makes sense. And if I were in that space and you wanted to develop some sort of application that could go do that, I mean, that would be that'd be a pretty incredible business. And you'd also have 7 years of backlog. And I'm assuming that there's a statute of limitations on this stuff that may or may not exist, but you would have backlog of years of posts that people could have been doing this ongoingly with different artists for years, that they could literally use a technology like that to go back and scrape. And if they could figure out the efficiency of it, could turn it into a heck of a business.
Yeah, and even stuff like you could, even if a business had correctly licensed a track and had incorrectly left it up for past the term limit. You could just go brand by brand and you could scrape all their YouTube and all their TikTok and all their Instagram and be like, oh, well, this one was only licensed until November of 2024 and now it's May 2025 and it's still up. So I'm going to demand another 6-month payment. That happens with talent pretty regularly when a brand fails to take a video or make a video private on their YouTube and they go, hey, it was a 1-year term, which is why, again, for one of the things I put in all non-union talent agreements, and I try to get in every music license or any kind of other stock imagery license, is an archival use. So if any of your brands that you work with are looking to license something, one thing that is always best to have in there is language around allowing it to be used in archival use in perpetuity, and so you can just let it sit in the feed, because otherwise you do find people who will go through and they will scrape back and be like, oh, well, this video is still up and it shouldn't be because it has this track in, or it has this piece of art in, or it has this talent in, and then they'll come looking for money unless you have that archival use in perpetuity language in your original agreement. But yeah, I just think it's I'm old enough that I remember when the internet wasn't around, and so I've seen it, and I'm of the age that was, like an early adopter while still in school, and then the insane changes that have happened. And again, even in the 10 years that I've been in this business, the shift from still, you make a commercial and you make a 60 and then you make a 30 cut down and you make a 15 cut down, and those go on TV and they go on cable and you might post them to your YouTube. And the shift to everything being about digital, both organic and paid, streaming digital. And so seeing all of those shifts, and then also how the AI stuff is happening concurrently with the shifts towards everything being more digital, and even the talk of using generative AI to completely make a commercial from start to finish, or using AI to make a song that might sound too much like an established recording of a pop song, and you feed it into an AI engine and you say, make something that sounds like, whatever, and then having those issues and having to talk about those issues with, lawyers that I work with about like how close is too close for a piece of art or for a person's likeness or for a song. So there's even, if your clients are saying like, oh, I just went to, Midjourney or whatever, or I went to one of the AI engines that will create a song and I said, make me a song that sounds like this, there's still risk there because you are still using a prompt with someone's IP in to create this output that you're then using to promote your business.
Wow, things are moving quick.
There's a lot, man. There's a lot to think about.
Yeah, there really is. And I would love to do another episode in the near future about where we're headed with generative AI. But I really appreciate you coming in. And this has been awesome. And it's a fascinating world that you live in, Matthew.
Yeah, it is. I really like it. It's the best job I ever had.
Awesome.
But it's a lot to think about.
Well, his name is Matthew Hughes, and you can find him at birdiemanagement.com. That's birdiemanagement.com. That's birdiemgmt.com. Really appreciate you coming in today.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening to this edition of the Service Impact Podcast. We'll see you next time.